This is a mini lecture I'm calling The Big Blur, and the idea is to help you understand a concept that is sort of an overarching topic for this week's unit. The singular of media is a medium, and a medium can be a powerful thing. In fact, in the 1960s, Marshall McLuhan, who was a great thinker and critic in the area of media studies, famously said, "The medium is the message." And what he was trying to say is that the means by which information is communicated is so powerful that it has a really important role in shaping the content that is coming across to people. So if you communicate something on the newer medium of television at that time, he said it had a different value than if you were communicating things in newspaper or in radio. A consequential example of this was, of course, the 1960 presidential debates, which were the first ever televised and had Richard Nixon against very young and lesser well-known John F. Kennedy, Jr. In the debate, John F. Kennedy was attractive and appealing, and Richard Nixon famously sweat a lot and looked uncomfortable. Previously, political candidates didn't have to be on television, and this was the first time that the attractiveness and the telegenic qualities of presidential candidates came into play, hence McLuhan's quotation. It's important for us today, though, because this has really started to shift. The whole idea of a medium is falling out beneath our feet. So where previously we used to have really distinct categories in the mind of the consumer between what was the difference between a film and a television show, even the actors who used to be film actors who would never appear on television except rarely on a talk show to promote their film, right? That has really changed. We see people moving back and forth between film and television all the time. Similarly, there's other kinds of blurs that we'll talk about in this lecture. In addition to how the consumer sees these different media, it's also changing behind the scenes. We used to have people in the radio business, in the film business, or in the magazine business, but this has all really started to merge. There's also separate technology and devices that we used to have. You used to have an actual radio, a television to receive signals. You had to get a computer if you wanted to have internet content, and other things had print. You had to have subscriptions for newspapers and magazines to come to your home. That has also really changed. So one of the biggest areas in which we've seen change is definitely in print. And there's a blur happening. First, with newspapers, who are largely print newspapers going out of business. Over 3,000 in just the last 20 years have gone out of business. Print magazines that are declining at an even faster rate. And print brands overall beginning to just evolve into digital publishing. Even books, and what we used to consider books in the publishing industry, are all now just digitally published content for a huge portion of their sales. So all of this means that the distinction between news and information, entertainment media, is really blurring because it's just digital content to us now instead of books, newspapers, and magazines. Radio is also blurring with podcasting. The BBC Radio, which is one of the largest global radio operators out of the UK, has largely pushed a lot of their content onto podcast platforms. National Public Radio in the United States, which has a station in nearly every major metropolitan area across the United States, has started shifting a lot of its content to podcasts instead of being broadcast over the radio. And even here in Pasadena at KPCC, which used to be Pasadena City College's radio station on campus and is now a very large National Public Radio news and information channel, has rebranded itself. They've changed the whole name of it to LAist, which is a digital media and podcasting brand. They literally have bet that podcasting and digital media are going to sort of blur all the historical distinctions and make us forget that something called radio even existed. iHeartRadio, of course, and other chains are now podcast players, as you saw last week. So in the world of radio and podcasting, again, digital media has caused a change, a blur. Film and television is an enormous area of blurring. We used to have a really distinct line between film and television, and now that's kind of gone. Here's a quote I found in Variety that says, "Where gilded properties like Star Wars were once stratified as the stuff of movies only, the explosion of content platforms has erased the lanes that used to specifically define something as film or TV." And we now, of course, have a lot of Star Wars television shows in addition to feature films in the Star Wars universe. Netflix really got the ball rolling as far as the blurring when they started making their own films that they released theatrically, but then also streamed in some cases immediately or almost immediately on their platform. Therefore, making the distinction of what's the difference between a made for TV movie and a Netflix movie that's in the theater. If you release it in the theater, it can be nominated for an Oscar. That's about the only distinction now. Gaming, as we'll see in the modules this week, is the next area of big blur. So what generated all this blurring? It wasn't just inevitable. A lot of it ties back to the year 2007 and when Steve Jobs introduced the very first iPhone. The ability to have one device that could convey so many different media on it simultaneously and sort of make it all feel like the same thing because it's all on one device really is facilitating a lot of this. So smart devices, smart TVs, but especially portable smartphones. Because the device has changed, it's changed everything. The companies behind the scenes are blurring, industries are merging, and our ability to discern news, information, entertainment, and even what to call content is becoming less stable. Even at Pasadena City College, we're struggling with what to name our department. We know we need to rename cinema, radio, television programs, and across the country, all of our programs are saying, what are we called now? How are we going to name ourselves in a way that will still make sense and be relevant as we continue to transform how we teach to try and reflect the big blur that's happening in the world around us?